Finger on the trigger, she said. Any last words, human? Yeah, he smirked. Safety's on. The air in the cargo bay smelled of burnt metal and ozone. Sparks flickered across broken panels, casting long, shifting shadows that danced along the walls. Captain Jace Harper leaned against a crate, his chest rising and falling steadily, even as his pulse hammered against his ribs. Somewhere above him, the station groaned and shifted, the faint tremors rattling loose debris across the floor. He could feel the gravity of the situation, literally and figuratively, but he refused to show it. Not now, not when the alternative was surrender. From the far end of the bay, a light swept across the floor, sharp and controlled, pinpointing him with terrifying precision. Commander Rhalyra stepped into view, her form tall and imposing, her armor glinting under the emergency lights. Her hand rested on the trigger of her plasma rifle, the hum of energy rising to a piercing pitch. Her eyes, dark and unyielding, locked onto Jace's with a kind of cold calculation that made lesser humans freeze. "Any last words, human?" she said, her voice cutting through the air like a laser beam. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Jace's lips curled into a smirk. He straightened, letting the shadows play across his face. "Yeah," he said, voice calm, almost bored. "Safety S on." Rhalyra froze for a heartbeat. Then she laughed, short, sharp disbelief laced through it. "You think that's funny?" Her tone held the edge of danger, like a whip ready to snap. "I think it's smart," Jace replied, tilting his head as if he were considering a painting on the wall rather than an armed alien pointing at his head. "You see, most people panic. Most people shoot first and ask questions never. I like to think ahead." Her eyes narrowed. She stepped closer, the weapon never leaving him. Sparks from a nearby shorted panel crackled over her armor. The air smelled like burnt circuitry, metal, and ozone, thick with tension. The station trembled again, and a distant alarm screamed, warning of something catastrophic happening outside the walls. "Thinking won't save you," she said. "You're surrounded, you can't run, and you can't fight me. This ends now. Surrounded, maybe, can't fight you, maybe." "But the end isn't set yet," Jace said, letting his smirk deepen. He shifted slightly, using the crates as cover while keeping one eye on the weapon. Humans had a funny way of surviving. It wasn't always through strength, not always through numbers. Often it was through thinking faster, noticing the things others overlooked. That was what he relied on now. Rhalyra's finger flexed over the trigger, the plasma rifle humming like a living thing. "I admire courage," she said slowly, "but this is foolishness, human. You will die and it will be slow." "I'm pretty good at improvising," Jace said. His voice carried a lightness that somehow made the moment even more dangerous. The kind of dangerous that makes an enemy pause just for a second. Humans had always had that spark. Even when cornered, even when facing something far stronger, far bigger, far faster, they adapted. They survived. He glanced around the bay. Broken crates stacked high, panels dangling from the ceiling, stray wires sparking unpredictably. In zero-gravity sections of the station, equipment floated freely. Jace's eyes moved like a predator scanning for weakness, noticing the slight tilt in a panel, the way a loose crate could swing if nudged, the tension in the wires above. Everything could be used. Everything could become a tool. "You rely too much on tricks," Rhalyra said. Her tone sharpened. She could feel the human's confidence, the small, infuriating grin that suggested he had a plan. Most aliens, she knew, would crumble under pressure. But humans were unpredictable. They were irritatingly clever, and that made them dangerous. Jace shifted again, this time a little faster. His hand brushed a crate, sending it tilting, producing a tiny metallic clatter. Rhalyra's eyes flicked to the movement. She moved with deadly precision, firing a quick shot that melted the crate's corner. Sparks flew and smoke rose, but Jace was already moving. He rolled to one side, hitting the ground and kicking off a floating panel, which rotated in zero gravity before striking another piece of debris. Rhalyra raised her weapon again, firing a burst that cut a strip of metal from the wall. The sparks cascaded across the floor, reflecting in her eyes like firelight. "You will not escape," she hissed. "I didn't say I was escaping," Jace replied, ducking behind a taller stack of crates. His mind raced. Every alien had a rhythm, a predictable set of reactions. Humans had no rhythm, at least not one that could be anticipated. That unpredictability was their shield. His hand found a loose wire hanging from the ceiling, and with a flick, it arced a small electrical spark toward a metal crate. The crate jerked violently, nearly knocking Rhalyra off balance. She cursed under her breath. Her confidence was starting to crack just slightly, just enough that she was thinking, and thinking while shooting was dangerous. Humans thrived in moments like this in the chaos of hesitation. The station trembled again, stronger this time. A distant explosion shook the floor beneath them, throwing dust and debris into the air. Red emergency lights blinked faster, throwing the bay into an almost strobing effect. Jace's pulse remained steady. This was his environment now. He could use every tremor, every spark, every floating piece of debris to his advantage. R'lyra advanced slowly, every step precise, her weapon never wavering. "I've tracked humans before," she said, almost conversationally, though her tone carried ice. "They survive because of luck. You will not find that luck today." Jace laughed quietly, low enough that it was more a vibration in his chest than a sound. "Luck's a lot less important than thinking," he said. "You should try it sometime." The alien hesitated, just a moment, and that moment was enough. Jace seized it. He lunged sideways, grabbing a loose crate and swinging it with all his strength. It collided with a stack of panels, which tipped over, sending a chain reaction of debris crashing toward R'lyra. She jumped backward, firing a warning shot that melted the edge of a crate. Sparks flew everywhere, but Jace was already moving toward a narrow gap between two walls. "You can run," she said, her voice tight, "but you can't hide forever." "Maybe," Jace replied, rolling over another piece of debris, "but I don't need forever, I just need enough." The gap led to a maintenance shaft barely wide enough for a human to squeeze through. Jace pushed himself inside, feeling the cold metal press against his back. He paused for a second, listening. The hum of R'lyra's rifle, the distant alarms, the creaking of the station, it all created a rhythm he could use. R'lyra appeared at the end of the bay again, scanning, her eyes catching the last glimpse of him slipping into the shaft. Her grip tightened on the rifle. "Human," she called, voice echoing, "you will not escape." He smirked, pressed against the wall of the shaft, and whispered under his breath, "Not escaping, just surviving." The station shuddered violently again. Dust and debris fell from above, and somewhere far off, a metal door slammed shut. The lights flickered, and for a second the entire bay was bathed in red emergency glow. Jace's mind raced. He wasn't out of danger, far from it, but he was moving, thinking, and improvising. That was enough. Even trapped humans had advantages. They could turn weakness into strength, fear into focus, and desperation into opportunity. R'lyra had underestimated that. She had assumed predictability, and Jace had shown her just how wrong that assumption was. He paused in the shaft, taking a breath. Sparks rained down from broken panels, dust tickled his throat, and the hum of distant systems vibrated in the metal. But he was alive. And alive in this station meant he could fight another moment, think another step ahead, and most importantly, stay human in a place designed to crush everything human. "Safety, S on," he whispered again, this time with a grin, though no one could see it. It wasn't a joke. It was a warning, and the game was only beginning. Jace moved carefully through the narrow maintenance shaft, the metal walls pressing against his back as he slid along. The hum of the station's damaged systems vibrated beneath his feet. Every step had to be precise. Every sound mattered. One wrong move, and Commander R'lyra would catch him in a deadly sweep of her plasma rifle. He knew she was fast, deadly, and patient. But humans, he reminded himself, had a gift aliens often overlooked: unpredictability. The shaft opened into a wider corridor lined with panels and equipment. Loose cables dangled from the ceiling like snakes, and small bursts of sparks flickered along damaged conduits. Jace paused, listening carefully. The distant sound of R'lyra's boots echoed through the metal corridors. She wasn't far behind. He could feel her presence, cold and unyielding, and it made his pulse quicken, but not from fear, from focus. He crouched behind a large crate and studied the path ahead. The corridor bent in several directions, giving him multiple escape options. One side led to the hangar bay where the escape shuttles were docked, though heavily damaged. Another led to storage rooms full of supplies that could be used as weapons or traps. He grinned. This station wasn't just a trap, it was a playground for someone who knew how to use it. R'lyra appeared at the end of the corridor. The hum of her rifle grew louder as she scanned the area. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, locked onto the last flicker of movement behind the crate. "Human," she said, voice carrying clearly through the corridor, "I suggest you surrender. Resistance is useless." Jace leaned lightly against the crate, letting out a low laugh. "Resistance is my specialty," he replied. His voice carried a calm confidence that made her pause for just a fraction of a second, a fraction he intended to use. He kicked a small toolbox across the corridor. It skittered along the metal floor, bounced off a panel, and clanged loudly against the wall. Rhalyra reacted instantly, firing a quick burst that vaporized the toolbox in sparks. Jace ducked as a strip of molten metal sprayed toward him, narrowly avoiding the searing heat. He slid into a side room, moving silently despite the chaos around him. The room was dark and cluttered with machinery. Pipes ran along the walls and ceiling, some leaking steam, some sparking dangerously. Jace's eyes scanned for anything useful. He spotted a thick coil of cable on the floor and grabbed it, quickly tying it into a makeshift lasso. It wasn't much, but it could create a trap. He moved toward a section of the corridor where he could use the cable to slow Rhalyra down. Rhalyra advanced slowly, firing occasional bursts of her plasma rifle to test the area. Each shot lit up the corridor in flashes of blue light. Sparks flew, and metal screamed under the heat. Jace waited for the right moment, then swung the cable across the corridor. It tangled around a loose pipe and jerked it down with a loud crash. Rhalyra leaped back, narrowly avoiding being hit by the falling pipe. "You're clever," she said, adjusting her aim. "I will admit that, but cleverness will not save you forever." "Cleverness and timing," Jace replied, keeping his voice steady, "can make even the strongest enemy hesitate." The station shuddered violently again. A distant explosion rattled the walls, sending small debris floating in the corridor. Jace used the distraction to slip further down the corridor, moving into another storage room filled with crates of supplies. He ducked behind one and listened. Rhalyra's footsteps grew louder. She was close. Too close. He quickly scanned the room. Several crates were labeled as fragile, filled with pressurized canisters. If used correctly, they could create a loud explosion, enough to knock her off balance or at least force her to rethink her approach. Jace's mind raced. He had seconds to decide. He pulled a small panel from the wall, revealing wires and circuits. With a few quick adjustments, he rigged a small device to trigger a loud electrical spark when someone stepped on a pressure plate he set under a crate. Rhalyra stepped into the room, her rifle humming and glowing with deadly energy. Her eyes flicked to the crates, calculating the danger. Humans were known for improvisation, but even she hadn't expected the level of quick-thinking Jace had displayed so far. Jace ducked behind another crate, holding his breath. The moment felt stretched, almost unreal, as the tension built between the hunter and the hunted. Then the trap activated. Sparks flew and a loud metallic crash echoed through the room. Rhalyra stumbled, narrowly avoiding a flying piece of equipment. "Impressive," she muttered under her breath, readjusting her stance. "But this station will not protect you forever. You cannot keep improvising indefinitely." "Improvisation," Jace replied, peeking around the crate, "is my favorite weapon." The station trembled again. Alarms blared as a secondary explosion rocked a distant section of the station. Sparks rained down from damaged conduits and the lights flickered violently. Jace saw his chance. He sprinted toward a side corridor that led to the upper levels of the station. His boots clanged against the metal floor as he moved, the sound masked by the louder chaos of failing systems. Rhalyra's footsteps followed, precise and unrelenting. She was fast, but humans had a strange ability to turn chaos into opportunity. Jace's mind raced through calculations, distance, cover, timing, and the slight delays in her movements caused by her size and armor. He could use this. He had to. He reached a maintenance ladder leading upward. With a quick glance behind him, he climbed, the metal rungs cold and slick under his hands. Rhalyra reached the base of the ladder and fired a shot at him. The plasma streaked past, sizzling as it burned through a nearby pipe. Sparks flew and the heat washed over him, but he didn't falter. Humans were resilient, not just physically, but mentally. Fear could slow, but it couldn't control him. Jace reached a catwalk high above the bay. The metal grated beneath his feet, echoing with every movement. He paused, taking in the chaos below. The station was shaking violently now, panels falling, fires burning, and alarms blaring. Rhalyra emerged from the corridor below, scanning carefully. She was relentless, but her focus was narrower. She didn't expect the human to climb so high. He moved along the catwalk, eyes scanning for more tools, more opportunities. A loose panel above him caught his attention. He pried it free and used it to knock a hanging cable into the path below. Sparks flew and Rhalyra flinched, momentarily distracted. That split second was all he needed to jump across to a higher section of the catwalk, leading toward the upper hangar bay. "You are persistent," Rhalara said, her voice echoing up to him. "I will admit I did not expect this level of skill from a single human. Skill and a little bit of stubbornness," Jace replied, panting lightly but grinning. "Mostly stubbornness." The catwalk ended at a graded platform overlooking the upper section of the station. Below, he could see a damaged shuttle docked, flickering with lights, systems sparking. It wasn't ready for launch, but it could be made ready if he could get there in time. He had seconds to plan his next move. He jumped down from the platform, landing silently behind a crate. His mind raced. He could use the shuttle's launch systems as a trap. A sudden burst of energy, a short circuit, anything that would slow Rhalara long enough for him to climb aboard. The human mind thrived on problem-solving, even in desperate situations. Rhalara appeared at the edge of the platform, scanning, moving closer. "This ends now, human. Surrender and I may let you live briefly." Jace smirked, brushing dust from his jacket. "Live briefly sounds boring. I prefer to survive longer." With that, he triggered a small electrical device he had rigged earlier. Sparks flew, panels shifted, and a section of the catwalk buckled. Rhalara stumbled, firing instinctively, her shots hitting metal and sparks flying. Jace used the moment to sprint toward the shuttle, jumping over debris, his heart steady despite the chaos. He reached the shuttle and yanked open the hatch. Inside, the cockpit was damaged, flickering with emergency lights, but the controls were intact enough for a skilled pilot to manage. He climbed in, sealing the hatch behind him. He could feel the station's vibrations through the floor, smell the smoke and metal, hear Rhalara's frustrated shouts outside. He took a deep breath, hands on the controls. The shuttle wasn't ready for flight, but he had enough tools and knowledge to make it work, if he was clever, fast, and lucky. All human traits. Outside the window, Rhalara stood at the edge of the platform, rifle aimed, but paused. She was calculating, analyzing, considering. Jace could see the respect in her posture, even if she would never admit it. Humans were dangerous. They survived against impossible odds not because of strength, but because of wit, courage, and stubbornness. Jace grinned. This was just the beginning. The station was a trap, but he had turned it into an advantage. Chaos was his ally, improvisation was his weapon, and he was still alive. "Time to show you humans aren't so easy to catch," he whispered to himself. And with a roar of engines and sparks flying from the damaged docking clamps, the shuttle shuddered and lifted from the station, wobbling dangerously but holding together. The chase was far from over, but for now, Jace had taken the first step in turning the tables. The shuttle shuddered as it lifted from the station, the damaged engines groaning under the strain. Jace gritted his teeth, hands tight on the controls. Sparks flew from exposed wiring, and warning lights flashed in rapid succession. Each system he tried to stabilize flickered, threatened to fail, but he pressed forward. He had survived worse with less, and this was no exception. The human mind thrived in crisis, and he was about to prove it again. Through the front viewport, he could see the station's upper platforms crumbling from recent damage. Metal beams twisted like paper, sparks arcing from damaged conduits. Rhalara stood on a platform, her rifle raised, watching him escape. She made no attempt to move closer. Her armor and training told her she would not catch him easily in this chaos. But the alien's eyes were sharp, calculating, analyzing every movement of the shuttle. She would not give up, not yet. Jace focused, ignoring the heat of the engines, the trembling of the shuttle, and the distant alarms still echoing in the station. There was no time to panic. There was only action. He adjusted the shuttle's trajectory, banking slightly to avoid a falling panel. Sparks danced across the viewport as it scraped against the edge of a metal beam. He gritted his teeth and pushed forward, every movement precise, every calculation made on the fly. As he maneuvered, a series of warning lights caught his attention. The shuttle's life support systems were failing, oxygen levels dropping. He tapped the console with swift precision, rerouting power from the shield generator to life support. The engines screamed in protest, but the system stabilized, for now. Humans were clever at making something work even when it should not, and this was a perfect example. Below him, the station's main hangar bay was collapsing. Panels and crates fell into the emptiness of space. Rhalara had abandoned the chase for the moment, calculating the risk of the collapsing structure. She was not reckless. She had precision, patience, and power. But humans thrived in unpredictability, and Jace was living proof. The shuttle lurched violently as a loose beam scraped along its hull. Alarms screamed in a high-pitched wail. Jace cursed under his breath but did not falter. He reached for a secondary control panel, rerouting auxiliary power to the engines. The shuttle stabilized, just enough to continue forward. He spotted a narrow debris field floating near the station's exit corridor. It was risky, but it offered cover perfect for hiding from Rylara's sensors. He guided the shuttle through the floating debris, weaving between jagged metal pieces and exposed conduits. The metal scraped along the shuttle's hull, leaving deep grooves and sparks, but it held together. He could feel the station tremble beneath him, feel the vibrations through the controls. But he smiled. Chaos was his ally, improvisation his weapon. Suddenly, a sharp alarm blared. Sensors detected movement from a side corridor leading to the station's escape pods. Jace narrowed his eyes. He wasn't alone. Human figures appeared, moving stealthily among the wreckage. Resistance members, allies he hadn't expected to find. They were armed with improvised weapons, wrenches, laser cutters, and metal pipes, but their presence was a boost. Humans worked best when they coordinated, even in the most desperate situations. Jace activated the shuttle's external communicator. "Team, I'm here," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Head to the rendezvous point. We get out together." From the shadows, figures moved quickly, weaving around debris, making their way toward the shuttle. Each human was careful, precise, using the chaos of the station to avoid detection. They were fast, clever, and determined. Humans were small compared to aliens like Rylara, but their ability to adapt, to think, to use the environment, these were their advantages. Rylara's voice crackled over the station's emergency comm system. "Do not attempt to escape," she warned. "Your allies will not save you." Jace's smirk widened. "We'll see about that," he muttered. He kept maneuvering the shuttle, creating a protective barrier with the floating debris. He could see Rylara moving along the platforms below, trying to track his team. She was fast, but her size and the precarious structure of the station slowed her down. Humans were small and agile, slipping through gaps and using shadows as cover. The first human reached the shuttle, climbing aboard with careful precision. Jace helped them into the cockpit and guided the shuttle closer to the other approaching humans. Each arrival was tense. The space was tight, systems failing and alarms blaring, but their determination did not falter. Humans thrived in moments like these, turning danger into opportunity. As the last team member climbed aboard, Jace took a deep breath. They were all here alive, but the shuttle was barely functional. Engines sputtered, hull plating rattled, and systems were damaged. Yet with careful management and improvisation, they could escape. Humans had a remarkable ability to make the impossible work. Rylara moved faster now, abandoning some caution to close the distance. She fired a warning shot that scorched the metal just outside the shuttle, sending sparks flying. Jace leaned forward, rerouting power to the shields while calculating a flight path through the debris. The shuttle lurched violently, but he kept it steady. His team watched, tense but trusting him. Trust in humans was earned through action, and he had earned theirs. The station shuddered again, larger this time. A massive explosion rocked the outer ring, sending debris and fire into the corridor. Jace seized the opportunity. He pushed the shuttle's engines to full power, weaving through the debris with precision. Sparks flew around them as they narrowly avoided collisions, each movement a careful calculation of speed, distance, and timing. Rylara was relentless, following their path as best as she could. Her movements were precise, but she was larger, her armor heavier, and the collapsing station made every step dangerous. Jace smiled. Humans didn't need to be stronger, they just needed to be clever, fast, and adaptable. That was enough. The shuttle reached the outer docking bay, where smaller escape pods were stored. Jace guided his team toward a pod that was intact enough for emergency use. They climbed in quickly, taking only what they could carry. The pod's controls were simple but effective, enough to get them away from the station. Jace monitored from the shuttle, giving precise instructions. Humans worked well under pressure, using every second wisely. As the team prepared to launch, Rylara appeared on a floating platform near the exit, weapon raised. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, and filled with frustration. "You will not leave this station alive," she said. Jace leaned back, hands steady on the shuttle's controls. "Maybe not," he said calmly, "but you'll have to work hard to catch us." He activated a makeshift propulsion system in the shuttle, sending a controlled burst of thrust toward Rylara's platform. Sparks and debris flew as the platform shifted, forcing her to leap back. The pods launched, one by one, into the void of space. Each human inside was tense but focused. Humans had always survived against impossible odds, and this moment was no different. Rylara fired a few warning shots, but the pods were already moving too fast. Jace guided the shuttle alongside them, creating a protective formation. The station's collapse accelerated, debris floating in every direction, but humans were small, agile, and resourceful. They moved quickly, using the chaos to their advantage. Once the pods were clear, Jace engaged the shuttle's auxiliary engines for one last burst, putting distance between them and the station. The structure shook violently as the final explosions rocked the remaining platforms. Rylara watched, furious but unable to intervene as the humans escaped. Breathing heavily, Jace allowed himself a moment to smile. They were alive, battered, but not defeated. Humans had a remarkable ability to survive through cleverness, coordination, and courage. Rylara had underestimated them, and it had cost her the immediate victory. Inside the shuttle, his team looked at him with relief and admiration. They trusted him, and he had not failed. "We made it," one of them said, voice trembling but steady. "We made it because we think," Jace replied, glancing at the damage reports flashing across the console. "Humans don't survive by luck alone. We survive because we adapt, improvise, and keep moving forward." The team nodded, understanding the truth in his words. They had faced impossible odds, seen chaos all around them, yet they were alive. That was human ingenuity in action. That was what made them dangerous, even against stronger, faster, and deadlier enemies. Outside, the station burned, pieces floating into the void. Rylara disappeared into the shadows, her figure retreating as she recalculated her next move. She would come back, no doubt, but humans had survived her once. That knowledge alone would make them even more formidable in the future. Jace looked at his team, each face marked with soot and exhaustion. "This is just the beginning," he said. "We're not out of danger, but we are alive, and alive means we can fight another day." The shuttle engines hummed, carrying them further into the void of space. Sparks from the damaged hull lit the cockpit with brief flashes of light. Jace leaned back, allowing himself a moment of satisfaction. Humans had survived impossible odds before, and they would continue to do so. Chaos was a challenge, but humans thrived in challenges. And this was just another one they had overcome. For a moment, silence fell, broken only by the hum of the engines and the occasional crackle of damaged wiring. Then the team began coordinating their next moves, repairing systems, checking supplies, and preparing for the journey ahead. Humans always planned ahead, always adapted, always survived. And Jace Harper was the living proof. The shuttle drifted in the darkness of space, engines humming weakly but holding steady. Outside, debris from the destroyed station floated in slow, silent arcs. Jace's eyes scanned the readouts on the console, noting the minor failures and sparks from damaged circuits. Every flicker of light or alarm was a problem, but humans thrived on problems. They didn't panic, they adapted. And Jace Harper was about to show exactly why. His team moved around the cockpit, checking oxygen levels, fuel status, and the integrity of the hull. Each member was tense, but determination burned in their eyes. They were human, and humans always found a way to survive, even against impossible odds. "Jace," one of the team called, pointing at the monitor. "Sensors show movement ahead. It's her. Rylara, she's approaching fast." Jace's jaw tightened. He had known she would come after them. Rylara was patient, relentless, and deadly. But humans weren't just clever, they were audacious. And that audacity was about to turn the chase into a trap. "Good," Jace said calmly, leaning over the controls. "That means we can prepare. She's fast, but she's predictable. Watch the patterns." "She doesn't improvise like we do." The shuttle shuddered as Jace engaged auxiliary thrusters, weaving slightly through the field of debris. Rylara's sleek ship emerged from the shadows, her engines glowing ominously as she closed the distance. She fired a warning shot, energy streaking toward the shuttle, vaporizing a chunk of floating metal in its path. Sparks rained across the viewport. "Steady," Jace murmured, adjusting the shuttle's trajectory to avoid the next piece of debris. "We'll make this work." The team watched, tense but trusting. Humans were small, vulnerable, but clever. Their ability to turn chaos into advantage was unmatched. Jace grinned faintly. Ralara thought she had the upper hand, but she had underestimated human unpredictability. He activated a makeshift thruster boost, sending the shuttle spinning just enough to duck behind a floating metal container. The sudden movement forced Ralara to overshoot, narrowly missing a collision with a drifting beam. Jace's heart raced, but his mind remained clear. Chaos was a tool, and he was wielding it masterfully. "Jace, she's correcting her path," another team member said, voice tense. "She's not giving up." "That's fine," Jace replied, his tone calm. "Let her come, she's fast, but she's not thinking like we are. We control the environment." He gestured toward the cockpit controls. "Ready the external magnetic grapples. We're going to use the debris field to our advantage." The team moved quickly, attaching the magnetic cables to floating beams and crates. Jace's mind worked in overdrive, calculating trajectories, timing, and angles. Humans excelled at using their environment creatively, turning weakness into strength, and the debris field was full of potential weapons, barriers, and distractions. Ralera's ship drew closer, and she fired another burst of plasma energy. Jace activated the magnetic grapples, pulling a massive metal crate from the field directly into her path. The crate spun slowly, and with precise timing it collided with her ship's trajectory. Ralera veered sharply to avoid it, her engines straining, but she recovered. "Impressive," she muttered, almost reluctantly. "But cleverness will only get you so far," Jace smirked. "Maybe, but it keeps us alive long enough to win." He maneuvered the shuttle closer to a cluster of derelict satellites orbiting nearby. The satellites were old and damaged, their metal shells brittle. But for humans, even broken things were useful. Jace's plan was simple: create chaos and force Ralera to react, giving them a chance to escape. The shuttle weaved between the satellites, using their debris as cover. Ralera followed, firing cautiously. Every shot she took illuminated her position, revealing her path for a split second before disappearing into the shadows. Jace noticed the rhythm in her movements, the slight overcorrection she made each time she fired. Humans were masters of pattern recognition, and he used this to predict her next move. "On my mark," Jace said to his team, pointing toward the largest satellite in the cluster. "We'll use that one to slow her down." He engaged the thrusters, sending the shuttle spinning in a tight circle around the satellite. Sparks flew from grazing edges, the metal groaning under stress. Ralera followed, but Jace had calculated the perfect moment. He released one of the grapples, sending a smaller satellite drifting directly into her path. The collision wasn't catastrophic, but it forced her to swerve violently, losing speed and throwing her off balance. "Yes!" one of the humans shouted, gripping the console. "That worked. Patience," Jace said, smirking. "This is just the beginning." The shuttle darted forward, moving through the chaos with precision. Jace's mind raced, thinking several steps ahead, always improvising. Ralera recovered quickly, her eyes narrowing. She admired the human's audacity, even as frustration burned in her chest. Humans were annoying, unpredictable, and dangerous in ways she hadn't encountered often. As the chase continued, Jace spotted a narrow corridor of debris leading toward a smaller asteroid field. He knew the tight passage would be perfect for the next stage of his plan. Humans excelled in situations that required precision, timing, and quick thinking. "Hold tight," he said, adjusting the shuttle's angle. "We're going to give her a little surprise." The shuttle twisted sharply, moving through the narrow corridor, scraping past jagged rocks and metal beams. Ralera followed, her ship narrowly avoiding collisions. Sparks flew, metal groaned, and alarms blared from both ships. The environment was chaotic, but Jace controlled it. Humans thrived in chaos. At the end of the corridor, Jace activated the shuttle's auxiliary magnetic field. Small metallic debris from previous collisions coalesced into a spinning wall around the exit. Ralera approached, unaware of the trap. Her sensors were sharp, but she couldn't account for every piece of human improvisation. As she entered the corridor, the debris wall surged, forcing her to slow and maneuver. The shuttle darted past the opening, leaving her behind. Ralera cursed, firing a few desperate shots, but Jace was already moving into the next stage of his plan. "Almost there," he whispered. "Keep focused." The shuttle emerged into open space near a derelict research station. It was abandoned, dark, and silent, perfect cover for hiding and regrouping. Jace guided the shuttle carefully, docking with a section of the station that appeared stable. Sparks flew as the hull scraped against the metal docking clamps, but it held. The team climbed out, entering the abandoned station. It was dimly lit, with panels hanging from the ceiling and dust floating in the air. Humans were small, adaptable, and resilient. They could survive in environments that would crush larger, more powerful beings. Jace led them through the corridors, checking each room for hazards. The station was quiet, but they remained alert. Rolera was still out there, and she would not give up easily. But the humans had time now, time to regroup, repair, and plan their next move. "Nice work," one team member said, voice tense but relieved. "We actually lost her for a moment." Jace smiled faintly. "Not lost, just delayed, that's enough for now." He walked through the corridor, examining the old systems. Broken panels, exposed wiring, and damaged consoles littered the floor. But even this could be used. Humans had a gift for making something work from nothing. They could turn a broken station into a defensive stronghold, an advantage against a stronger enemy. Outside, Rolera hovered near the edge of the asteroid field, scanning. She had lost the humans for now, but she was calculating, planning, and waiting for the next opportunity. She would strike again, but humans were unpredictable, resourceful, and relentless. Inside the station, Jace gathered his team. "We're safe for the moment, but this is just one step. We need to repair what we can, prepare for her next move, and be ready. Humans survive by thinking, improvising, and acting boldly. That's what we're going to do." The team nodded, understanding the truth in his words. They had survived the impossible so far, and they would continue to do so. Humans didn't just survive by luck, they survived by courage, creativity, and determination, and Jace Harper was leading the way. He looked out a viewport at the endless stars beyond. The universe was vast, full of danger, but humans had a way of thriving in it. Against stronger, faster, and deadlier opponents, they improvised, adapted, and survived. Rolera would come again, but by then humans would be ready. For now, they had a moment of safety, a moment to breathe, repair, and plan, but the game was far from over. Humans never backed down, never surrendered, and never gave up. And that was exactly why they were dangerous. Jace's hands hovered over the console, eyes scanning every readout, every flicker of light, every spark of activity. He was already thinking several steps ahead, planning the next move, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. Humans were small, vulnerable, but clever. And cleverness could overcome almost anything. The station creaked and groaned as it settled, debris shifting around them. Inside, the humans worked together, repairing minor damage, setting traps, and preparing defenses. Every movement was calculated, every decision deliberate. Humans thrived on strategy, improvisation, and teamwork. They were small, yes, but their minds were their greatest weapon. And Jace Harper, calm and confident at the center of it all, smiled faintly. Chaos could be terrifying, but humans used it to their advantage. The next confrontation with Rolera would not be easy, but they would be ready. For now, they survived, and survival was the first step toward victory.